Test 5 review. There are 15 questions. I will go over question number 1. Claim fewer than 8.3% of homes have only a landline telephone and no wireless phone. Sample data. A survey by the National Center for the Health Statistics showed that among 12,762 homes, 5.8% had landline phones without wireless phone. So complete part A and B. Express the original claim. Original claim has a proportion that is, as you can see here, fewer than 8.3%, so less than 0.083. Remember, the alternate null hypothesis means is equal to the original claim. So is equal to the proportion of the original claim, which is 0.083. And alternating hypothesis here is fewer than 8.3% of home have only a landline telephone. That's the claim. And the null hypothesis is P is equal to 0.083, and then alternating hypothesis is less than 0.083. Okay, let's go to next. This is question number 2. Claim fewer than 93% of adults have a cell phone. In a reputable poll of 1127 adults, 84% said that they have a cell phone. Find the value of the test statistics. So as you can see, this is the formula for the test statistics for the proportion. Either you can use this formula manually in a calculator like this, or you can just use StatCrunch you have given here. If you use the StatCrunch, then you have to, if you go to the StatCrunch, there is a stat and proportion stat one sample with summary. We don't have given data here, we just have given summary. To find the number of success, it's 84% of 1127. So we can use this calculator for finding 1127 times 84%, which is 946.68. 946.68. That's the number of success out of 1127. And then null hypothesis is equal to, as you can see here, it's 93%, and alternating hypothesis is less than 93%. If you just click compute here, this is the number. That's the test statistics, which you can see here. This formula also calculates the very same thing, but you can also calculate that value using the StatCrunch directly. That's negative 11.84 if you round it to the 2 decimal place. This is question number 3. The G-score is given and the claim is proportion should be greater than 0.4. Identify the hypothesis test as being two tail, left tail, or right tail. Whenever proportion is greater than something as an alternating hypothesis, this is the right tail test. P-value can be found by using technology. We're going to use StatCrunch here, and to use the StatCrunch, it's a very easy way to find the p-value. Go to the stat calculator and there is a normal. Click that, and you don't have to change anything. You just have to put the value of G-score here, which is in this case 2.115, but we would like to find the p-value for the G-score greater or equal to 2.115, and as you can see here, that's area under this curve, which is 0.0157. If you round it to the 3 decimal places, it's 0.016. 0.016. Here you can see that p-value is greater than alpha. So if you go to this conclusion, p-value is greater than alpha, fail to reject null hypothesis. Let me double check here. P-value is 0.016, alpha is 0.01, so fail to reject null hypothesis. There is not sufficient evidence to support the claim that P is greater than 0.4. In a study of 807 randomly selected medical malpractice lawsuits, it was found that 489 of them were dropped or dismissed. As you can see here, 489 is greater than half of the 807, so more than half were dropped or dismissed. That's coming from the sample. Now, use a 0.05 significance level to test the claim that most medical malpractice lawsuits are dropped or dismissed. So, our null hypothesis would be proportion is equal to, equal, meaning 0.5. And then the alternating hypothesis is proportion is greater than 0.5. So we need to find out that thing that is here. Now, to find the test statistics G-score, there are two ways you can find it: by using technology like TI-8384 calculator, or by using the StatCrunch. I'm going to use StatCrunch here. So go to the stat, go to the proportion, go to the one sample, use the summary. So as you can see here, out of 807, 489 were successful out of 807. That's coming from our sample. Now the hypothesis test here, the null hypothesis is equal to the 0.5. Alternating is greater than 0.5. Now if we just hit compute, it gives us so many information like G score, which is 6.01. If you want to round it to the 2 decimal place, it's a 6.02. So that's our G score, 6.02. Now for the p-value, let's go back here. As you can see here, p-value should be less than 0.0001. If you round it to the 3 decimal places, it would be 0. So whenever p-score is less than alpha, so now if you can go here and compare, when the p-value is less than alpha, reject the null hypothesis. So reject the null hypothesis because the p-value is less than or equal to the significance level. Rejection means that there is not sufficient evidence to support So there is not sufficient evidence to warrant rejection of the claim that most medical malpractice are dropped or dismissed. No. There is not sufficient evidence to support the claim that most there is sufficient evidence to warrant rejection of the claim that most medical malpractice lawsuits are dropped or dismissed. There is sufficient evidence to support the claim that most medical malpractice lawsuits are dropped or our answer should be there is not sufficient evidence to support the claim that most medical malpractice lawsuits are dropped or dismissed. So in this case, as you can see here, p-value is less than alpha, so reject the null hypothesis. Null hypothesis would be equal to 0.5. So the answer is there is sufficient evidence to warrant rejection of the claim that most medical malpractice. There is sufficient evidence to support the claim that this is the right answer. This is problem 5. A poll of 1114 teens aged 13 to 17 showed that 54% of them have made new friends online. Use a 0.1 significance level to test the claim that half of all teens have made new friends online. So the null hypothesis is half of all teens, which is 0.5, and then alternating of this half is not equal to half, which is not equal to half. For finding the G-score, we can use StatCrunch here or TI-8384 calculator. It's up to you. I'm going to use StatCrunch, and I'm going to use calculator for the StatCrunch, and I'm going to use proportion start one sample with summary, and then number of success. As you can see here, it's a 54% of 1114, so I can calculate that. What does that mean? 1114 times 54% is actually it's 600.56, 601.56, and number of observation is 1114, and then null hypothesis is 0.5, and if you just hit compute, it gives you G-stat test G-score, which is 2.67. P-value is if you go back here, p-value is 0.0076. If you round to the 3 decimal places, is a 0.008. And then if you compare the p-value with the this significance label, p-value is less than alpha, which means if you go back here, if p-value is less than alpha, reject the null hypothesis. And this is how you conclude. Does the original claim contain the condition of equality? Yes. And you reject the null hypothesis? Yes. There is sufficient evidence to warrant the rejection of the claim. That is our conclusion. So reject the null hypothesis. There is sufficient evidence to warrant the rejection of the claim. Problem 6. A data set about speed dating includes like ratings of male deaths made by the female deaths. The summary statistics are: the sample size is 192, the sample mean is 7.87, sample standard deviation is 2.16. Use a 0.01 significance label to test the claim that the population mean of such rating is less than 8. Assume that a simple random sample has been selected. Identify the null and alternating hypothesis, test statistics, p-value, and then state the final conclusion. So here the null hypothesis is mean is equal to 8, and then alternating hypothesis is where is the claim? Okay. To test the claim that population mean of such rating is less than 8. So less than 8. Okay, this is our alternating hypothesis, less than 8. So for finding the test statistics, we can use StatCrunch here. It's a t-test test. So go here, stat t-test, one sample with summary. Sample mean, as you can see here, it's 7.87, and sample standard deviation is a 2.16. Sample size it's 192. Hypothesis test, alternating null hypothesis is equal to 8, alternating hypothesis is less than 8, and if you compute, it gives you t statistics, t stat negative 0.83. If you round it to the 2 decimal place, negative 0.83. So what is the p-value? If you go back there and then go to the last cell here, the p-value is 0.2027. Round to the 3 decimal place, it's a 0.203. So, and then because p-value is, as you can see here, greater than the null significance label, go back here to make the conclusion. P-value is greater than alpha. Fail to reject. So fail to reject. So this is not original equality. So go here, fail to reject. This is our conclusion. There is not sufficient evidence to support the claim. So fail to reject. So there is not sufficient evidence to conclude the mean of the population of rating is less than that. That's supposed to be the claim. So that is our answer. This is another problem. Problem number 7. A simple random sample of 10 pages from a dictionary is obtained. The numbers of words defined on those pages are found with the results. The sample size is 10. Average is 63.6 words. Standard deviation is 16.4 words. Given that this dictionary has 1,457 pages with defined words, the claim that there are more than 70,000 defined words is equivalent to the claim that the mean number of words per page is greater than 48 words. Greater than. So null hypothesis is equal to 48 and alternating hypothesis is greater than 48. So that's our hypothesis. How do you find the test statistics? As you can see, again, we can use StatCrunch. I'm going to use StatCrunch one more time. It's a t statistics, so I'm going to choose t-stat, one sample with the summary, and sample mean, as you can see here, it's a 63.6 sample standard deviation that's given, it's a 16.4. The sample size it's given, it's a 10. Now the average, null hypothesis is 48, and then alternating is, what is that, greater than 48. So greater than 48. Let's do the compute here. It gives you t-stat, which is 3.00 8. If you round it to the 2 decimal place, it's a 3.01. 3.01. And if you find the p-value, which is in this case given, p-value is 0.0074. If you round to the 3 decimal places, it's a 0.007. As you can see here, the p-value is less than alpha. So if it's less than alpha, then we need to reject the null hypothesis. There is no equal, reject the null hypothesis. So there is sufficient evidence to support the claim. So that is our conclusion. Reject the null hypothesis. There is sufficient evidence to support the claim that the average is more than 70,000 defined words in dictionary. Question number 8. Students estimated the length of 1 minute without reference to a watch or clock, and the times in seconds are listed below. This is the data. Assume that simple random sample has been selected, so it's already given. Use a 0.01 significance level to test the claim that these times are from a population with the mean equal to 60. So the null hypothesis is mean equal to 60, which is 60 seconds. And then alternating is mu is not equal to 60. Does it appear the student reasonably good? Okay, not equal to 60. Now, the test statistics can be found by using the StatCrunch. If you open the StatCrunch here and go to t-test here with the one sample with the data. In this case, it's given. The data is given. You can always open the data in StatCrunch, and you can use that data for finding the test statistics with the one sample with the data. Data is coming from variable 1, and then as you can see here, the mu value is equal to 60. That's the null hypothesis, and alternating is not equal to 60. If you hit compute, it gives you test statistics which is 0.057. So 0.57. That's the test statistics. One more time, it's a 0.57, and then p-value is 0.58. P-value is 0.58. As you can see here, the p-value is greater than significance level alpha. So if you go here and you see p-value is greater than alpha, fail to reject and go to this direction because it has equality, and fail to reject. This is your conclusion. There is not sufficient evidence to warrant the rejection. So fail to reject. There is not sufficient evidence at 0.01 significance level to warrant the rejection. The claim that times are from a population with the mean equal to 60 seconds. On this basis, it does not appear that as a group fail to reject. Students are reasonably good at estimating 1 minute. Okay, does not. It appears that as a group, the students are reasonably good at estimating 1 minute. This is problem number 9. A study was done using a treatment group and a placebo group. The results are shown in the table here. Assume that 2 samples are independent simple random samples selected from normally distributed population, and do not assume that the population standard deviation are equal. Complete paths A and B, which is given here. Use a 0.1 significance level for both paths. Okay, so this is the information we have given. What are the null and alternating hypotheses? Test the claim that 2 samples are from the same population. So that means the null hypothesis would be 2 means would be equal and alternating would be not equal. Okay, and for finding the test statistics, we can go here. We can use StatCrunch. We can go to t-test. Go to t-test with the 2 sample with the summary data, and we can use this information here. The sample mean for the first one is 2.34, 2.34, 2.34. Sample standard deviation is 0.59. Sample size is 31. Similarly for the sample 2, the mean is 2.623 and standard deviation is 0.88. and sample size is 37, and the hypothesis test, the difference should be 0, because as you can see here, the difference, they should be equal, and the difference between them is not equal to 0. That's our alternating hypothesis. If we just hit compute, it gives us the value of t statistics, which is negative 1.61, negative 1.62, and the p-value is 0.111 if you round it to the 3 decimal places. So it's a negative 1.61, negative 1.61, and let me just go back here, 1.6, it's a 2 decimal place 62, and then for the p-value it's a 0.111 if you round it to the 3 decimal place, 111. As you can see here, the p-value is greater than alpha. So whenever you have the p-value greater than alpha, so fail to reject, and as you can see here, it's a yes, fail to reject. So this is our conclusion: there is not sufficient evidence to warrant the rejection. So fail to reject, there is no sufficient evidence to warrant the rejection. For finding the confidence interval, go back to that StatCrunch and go to the option, just do the edit and just go to the confidence interval. Normally you have to put 1 minus 2 times alpha, but this alpha, this value is given for both parts. So 1 minus 0.9 is 1 minus 0.1 is 0.9. So this is what it goes here, and if you just compute, it gives you the lower limit for that confidence interval, which is negative 0.589. So negative 0.590, negative 0.590, that's the lower limit, and then upper limit is 0.009. So in 3 decimal places, 0.009. Let me double check if it's positive. Yes. So if you check your answer, that's your answer. Go to the next problem. It's question number 10. A researcher conducted trials to investigate the effects of color on creativity. Subjects with a red background were asked to think creative uses for a brick. Other subjects with a blue background were given the same task. Responses were scored by a panel of judges, and results from a score of creatives are given in the accompanying table. So the table is given here. These are the results, background, and then the size and average and standard deviation, everything. Now that is given here. So higher scores corresponding to more creativity. The researcher make the claim that blue enhances the performance on a creative task. Assume that the two samples are independent simple random samples selected from normally distributed population, and do not assume that the population standard deviation are equal. Complete part A and B. So use a 0.01 significance level to test the claim that blue enhance performance on the creative task. So first of all, the null hypothesis is they are equal, and alternating hypothesis is blue enhances the performance. So mu1, if you click it here for the blue, as you can see here, it's a mu1 is greater than mu2. So where is that? This one, mu1 and mu2 are equal. That's the null. Its alternating is mu1 is greater than mu2. That is the claim we are making here. So now we have to use the StatCrunch for solving for solving rest of the part. How do you find the t statistics? Go to StatCrunch and then just do the same thing we did for the previous problem. Go to stat t-test, 2 sample with summary, put the information given here. What are the information you have? This is the information where I'm going to copy it here. So the sample mean, the first one, it's a 3.74. Sample standard deviation is 0.51. The sample size is 49. And for the second sample, the sample mean is 3.06. Sample standard deviation is 0.83. The sample size is 39. Now the difference is equal to 0. That is our null hypothesis because they are equal. And what else? So the alternating hypothesis is mu1 minus mu2 has to be greater than 0. So it has to be greater than 0. Okay, so if you hit compute, it gives you test statistics, which is 4.486. If you round it to the 2 decimal places, it's a 4.49. 4.49. And what is the p-value? The p-value is less than 0.0001. So if you round it to the 3 decimal places, it's a 0. So p-value is less than alpha. So what is the conclusion here? P-value is less than alpha. That means reject the null hypothesis. So in this case, they are not equal. So we go to this direction and reject the null hypothesis. So this is our conclusion. There is sufficient evidence to support the claim. So reject the null hypothesis. There is a sufficient evidence to support the claim that the blue enhances performance on a creative task. So for finding this confidence interval, you go back here, use the option one more time, edit, and then choose this confidence interval. This time you have to choose 1 minus 2 times alpha. As you can see here, the significance level, if you go back to the question, where is the significance level? Where is the significance level? Okay, here, if you click it here, no, I do not. Okay, yeah, here is the significance label, 0.001 significance label to test the claim that blue enhances. So there is no both parts. So 1 minus 2 times this is 0.98. So that's the reason we are going to choose 0.98. And if you hit compute, it gives you the lower limit for that confidence interval, which would be 0.31, 0.32, and upper limit is 1.04, 0.32, 1.02. So these are the lower and upper limit. From here, 0.32 rounded to the 2 decimal place, 1.04, 1.04. Sorry, it's not 02, it's 04. 04. Okay, so as you can see here, the difference between this mean is always positive. So what is about the confidence interval that results in the same conclusion from part A? So part A concludes that reject the null hypothesis. There is sufficient evidence to support the claim that blue enhances performance on the creative task. And if mu1 and mu2 are always positive, the confidence interval contains only positive value. So there is sufficient evidence to support the claim that blue enhances performance on a creative task. This difference is always positive. That means mu1 is greater than mu2. So that supports the claim. Okay. Okay, so this is number 11. Listed below are body temperature from 5 different subjects measured at 8 a.m. and again at 12 a.m. Find the values of average of the difference and ST, that means the standard deviation for that difference. In general, what does mu d represent? So first of all, these are the data we have given. D stands for difference between these data. So I already copied this in StatCrunch here. And then after copying it, I found the difference by using this data and then compute an expression, and then by building this difference between them. So this minus this gives me the difference. So this is the difference. You can do it manually by using simple calculator as well, but you can also compute. This is just the difference between these two columns. Okay, and we are going to answer this question for this third column. And for that one, if you go to the stat and then summary stat for the column, choose D. D stands for the third column, and compute it. It's going to give you everything. The mean is negative 0.42. The standard deviation is 0.45. So these are the value. I took it from here. Now, if you go here, in general, what does mu D represents? This is actually the mean of the difference from the population of the mass data. Okay, so that's problem 11. Let's go to next problem, problem 12. Okay, so again, one more time, two different type of data. We need to find out the difference between them. D value and listed below are the numbers of words spoken in a day by each member of 8 different randomly selected couples. Complete part A and B. So use a 0.01 significance level to test the claim that among couples, males speak fewer words in a day than females. In this example, mu d is the mean value of the difference d for the population of all pair of data, where each individual difference d is defined as the words spoken by the male minus. So you have to minus words spoken by the female. So you have to find the difference between these two columns. So just copy this in StatCrunch, and then it's going to give you the two column. First column is for the male, second column is for the female. You can go to the data, you can do what is that, compute, expression, and build. Take male minus female and just do OK and compute. So now it's going to give you male minus female. This is actually D, this is actually D, the difference between the male and female. Remember, you always have to pay attention about what difference from which one to which one you are subtracting female from male, and that is given from here. D is the female minus male minus female. So now our hypothesis is null hypothesis is this difference. The average is always equal to the average for the the mean of difference for the population is 0, and now we our alternating claim is this average is greater than 0. Remember, this difference is male minus female, and we're claiming that the claiming in this problem, the claim is what is the claim? Claim is among the couples, males speak fewer words in a day than females. So it should be less than. It should be less than 0, because male minus female has to be negative so that male speaks fewer. So it should be less than. Now find out the rest of the information. What is the t statistic? Identify the test statistics. You need to find that for this column. So go here, statistics, t statistics, one sample with the data. Data is D, and now we have given the hypothesis test, the mu is 0, and then the difference, as you can see here mu is less than 0. That's the alternating hypothesis, and just compute. It gives you a t statistics value, which is negative 0.40, which is if you round it to the 2 decimal place, it's a negative 0.40. Yes, negative 0.4. Let me see, negative 0.40. P value is 0.3496, 0.349. If you round it to the next whole number, it's 3 decimal places, it would be 0.35. So here, as you can see here, p value is greater than significance alpha. So if you go here, p is greater than alpha, fail to reject. And for the conclusion, this is not equal, fail to reject. So this is our conclusion. There is not sufficient evidence. So since the p value is greater than significance level, so fail to reject the null hypothesis. There is not sufficient evidence to support the claim. Okay, so that's our conclusion. Now for the confidence interval, we do the same thing by going back here, option, edit, choose this one, confidence interval for mu. This one is 1 minus 2 times alpha, which is 0.98. Alpha is 0.01, so 2 times alpha is 0.02. If you compute for this one, it gives you the lower limit for that confidence interval, which is negative 1, 1. This one, I'm going to copy it. That's the lower limit. and remember that should be negative. And here it says round to the nearest integer as needed, so we need the nearest integer, so that should be nearest integer is 59. And for the upper one, it's 8898, so 998899, so that's the nearest integer, 8899. One more time, if you round it to the nearest integer, it would be 8899. And now, what feature of the confidence interval leads to the same conclusion reached in part A? Okay, since the confidence interval contains 0, failed to reject, what is that? Failed to reject the null hypothesis. So what is the null hypothesis? The difference is 0, and 0 is a part of this confidence interval, so failed to reject the null hypothesis. This is problem 13. This problem is very similar to the previous problem, like number 12, so I'm going to skip this. Let's go to problem number 14, which is a study of seatbelt users and non-users yielded the randomly selected sample data summarized in the table here. This is the data. If you are smoking cigarette, then the chances of wearing smoking cigarette, then chances of wearing seat belt, as you can see here, more cigarette user, less seat belt wearing, and data is given here. This is the data. So now based on this data, use a 0.05 significance level to test the claim that the amount of smoking is independent of seat belt use. That's the claim. A plausible theory is that people who smoke are less concerned about their health and safety and are therefore less inclined to wear seatbelt. That's the plausible theory. Is this theory supported by the sample data? So first of all, for this kind of problem, the null hypothesis is the amount of smoking, the the row variables and then column variables are independent. In this case, the amount of smoking is independent of seatbelts. So that's our null hypothesis. What is the alternating? The amount of smoking is not independent of seatbelt. And now the test statistics for this type of problem is chi-square. We can find that chi-square test by going to the StatCrunch, open the StatCrunch, and when you do that, there is a table. You go to the table, there is a contingency table with the summary. These are the summary we have given, so just click the summary. First of all, select the column. Column means, if you go back to this here, all this information, this one, these are the columns. So we just select, except the first one, all these are the columns. So we just select them, all these columns. And variables, row variables are variable 1. And then the hypothesis test is chi-square test for independence. Just compute, and it will give you the chi-square value, which is 1.92. That's how I found it, 1.926. Then p-value is 0.588. Now because p-value is less than alpha, p-value is less than alpha, what is that? P-value is less than alpha, greater than alpha, failed to reject the null hypothesis, meaning there is not sufficient evidence to reject the null hypothesis. Claim that the amount of smoking is independent. That's a null hypothesis. The theory is not supported by the sample data. But if you look at the sample data here, as you can see here, this data supports something else, but we don't care. Our null hypothesis based on our p-value, we are failed to reject. So there is not sufficient evidence to reject the null hypothesis. Okay, so if you go to the next problem is very similar to the previous problem. So I'm going to skip this problem here.